Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of Mechanical Mashup, and today what we're going to cover is chroma key, which is green screen. As well, I'm going to show you how to make a big reflector. So why would you want to do a chroma key? Well, basically it's so you can do things like yeehaw! That. What? What Dave's going to cover today is how to etch brass and make a really cool sign or plaque for somebody. And this also applies to printed circuit boards, so in the future, if you ever need to make something like that, this is a good way to go.
So ever since high school, I've made my own printed circuit boards for electronics projects that I've done using copper etching techniques. Now I found on the net that you can use the same techniques and some slightly modified ones to make some really cool brass etched plates. This acid here is a mixture of hydrochloric acid and hydrogen peroxide. So the first thing we want to do is prepare our brass. It has to be very, very clean first. So I'm just going to take some 400 grit sandpaper on a flat surface and just rub the black brass right on it. So after we sand it, I'm going to take some fine steel wool and clean it even further. You should have some left over from episode 1's adventure with fireworks. So now we need an image to transfer on. Now I wanted to do the Mechanical Mashup logo. So on my computer, I printed it out. Now, I actually printed it out backwards, because that's the way this is going to work. We have to print it out backwards, and when we transfer it on, it goes back forward. It's kind of like doing t-shirts. I took this to a photocopy store and had them print me out a photocopy on a transparency at the highest toner volume setting they had to make it as dark as possible, to put as much toner on it as possible, so I have as much toner as possible to transfer onto the brass. So I've taped on my transparency onto the brass plate. You can see I've just taped it on one side, which makes it much easier for me to peel it off afterwards. That's kind of important. Notice how the Mechanical Mashup is now facing the right way because it is toner side down. I've preheated my iron. I've got a piece of tissue paper over top so that if I melt the transparency, it's not going to stick to my wife's iron. Major safety thing here, the brass gets hot, super hot. It conducts heat very well. It will transfer all the heat from this iron into this plate and it will stay hot for a while. Don't burn your hands. So I'm going to take the iron, and it's on, this is set to number 3. It's the highest setting that doesn't involve steam. Now I have found if you press too hard, you'll actually make the ink run. So I'm very gently skimming over the top. Takes a little bit to get the brass plate hot too. The time it takes to do this depends a lot on the size of your brass. If you've got a nice small thin piece, shouldn't take long at all. I've got a relatively thick piece. Now if you totally screw it up, you just rip it off. You can put some acetone on it to clean off some of the toner. You can steel wool the rest of it off and start all over again. When I go to the photocopy store, I get at least 2 copies. Another thing to remember is when you're making your pattern, the dark areas are what will be masked and will not etch. And the light areas on your mask will be the ones that disappear or get eaten away. Well, that's pretty good. So here's our masked plate. Now on the back side, you'll notice it's still brass. Now if we try and etch it right now, the back will get eaten away as well, and we don't really want that. So we need to mask it with something. The easiest thing to do is just give it a real quick coat of spray paint. Now you can see there's still some edges here, and there's some touch-up spots that need to be fixed before we do our etching. I'm just going to use a permanent marker for that. Okay, so now I'm going to create my bath with the etchant. You'll notice I have gloves on. I've got safety goggles. And there's one other important thing, but I can't think of it right now. It's ventilation. You must have good ventilation. So I'm going to take my plate. I'm going to carefully lower it down into our solution. All we need to do now is let it sit and occasionally give it a little shake to agitate the acid. Okay, so after about 3 hours or so, we did have to remove a lot of brass. I've got this, and I'll bring it a little bit closer. Hopefully you can see some of the relief in it there. We have etched down, oh, maybe a 64th or so, but it's definitely something you can feel. So I have to take off my mask now, and I'm going to do that with sandpaper. The last step we have to do here is to sand one more time. There you go. We got a nice finished product here. Looks cool. Job well done.
Okay, if you're watching this on the MechanicalMashup.tv site, what you'll notice is down there will be a link inside the player, and it will say Facebook. If you click on that, it will take you to the Facebook group, and if you're in Facebook, all you have to do is join the group, and it'll really help us in producing more of these videos by making sure that we have people watching. Means that we can find people to advertise. So please, click on that link down there. So to make these pop-out keys is ridiculously simple. First you get some ribbon from a sewing store, and obviously you're going to have to get some fabric as well. Get some green fabric that would key out fairly well. That's usually, just go and try to find something green or blue. And you can always buy reflective material. Now I think the total of both these pieces of cloth cost me about $7. Then cut out the rough shape of the reflector or the chroma key that you're going to do. I always take these and I fold them twice in half and cut out the shape, so I only have to make one cut, and it keeps everything symmetrical. And the next thing I do is I start pinning down the ribbon around the outside. I generally lay it down on one side, sew it, and I fold it over and then sew over it again. It makes for a really tight seam all the way around. And then from this, you always leave one end just slightly open so you can feed some fish tape through. And what is fish tape? Well, it's the metal material that electricians use to feed the wires through the back of a wall when they can't take the gyprock or the drywall out. And you can see that little green reel. You can buy a roll of this stuff real cheap, pretty much any hardware store. So I just feed it all the way through. And once I'm at the very end, I just snug it up enough so that it lays reasonably flat. You can't get rid of all those wrinkles, but you can try, but it's just not, it'll end up potato chipping if you try to put too much pressure into it. And I tie off the overlapping pieces of the fish tape with just a little bit of wire. And then again, repeat that for the reflector. And that's what happens when you finish everything off nice and sweet. So there's how you can set up some more of your Gorilla Video Studio or your Gorilla Photo Studio on the cheap. So far I've spent about $300 on my studio, and I think I'm getting pretty decent results. The equivalent equipment would have cost me about between $5,000 and $7,000. So far I'm saving a little bit of money. Now don't worry, we're going to be covering some other stuff on electric vehicles and maybe some trebuchets and some really cool stuff in the future, but in the meantime I'd like to focus on actually setting up my Gorilla Studio. Also, keep in mind that I'd really like it if you went to the Facebook link that's down there, and that's only if you're at MechanicalMashup.tv, and if you look inside the player, this player here, you'll notice that down there, there's a link to the Facebook group. Go to the Facebook group and join us. Friend us up. It makes a big, big difference in us being able to produce a whole bunch more of these videos, because that will also allow us to get some more sponsors.